Rob, and welcome all. Another fun-filled afternoon with some real serious information that will help all of us as we go forward through these challenging and uncertain times. Amanda is a senior category team lead and marketing and consulting services with, as she said, some Swiss company called ABB, which stands for Assia Brown Boveri. Amanda was a high school teacher until 2012, where she taught math. And it's from that she learned the love of numbers. She has 4 children, and it allows her to tell her children using ratios and fractions that, okay, 25% of you are going to the store with me. Now, which 25% is another conversation, but they understand that when she says 25, it only means 1. Where am I? I just lost my place. She's worked in procurement and finance at Ahold Delhaize, Amazon, and she has sourced almost every category under the sun, both in direct and indirect. Her favorites are marketing, temp labor, consulting, and anything commodity related. Currently, raw beef and pork, which is another conversation. Currently, she's reading 4 different books. One of them is Pretty Things by Janelle Brown. And over the past 2 weekends, she has been to the first 3 seasons of Ozark and is hooked and anxiously awaiting season 4. So without further ado, hopefully, Amanda, you're still with us. Take it away.
Yes, hopefully the internet gods will cooperate. Thank you for that introduction. I forgot about all those things I put in my bio. Many of you may know that this talk was originally scheduled for back in March, before we were all quarantined at home. And so pushing it forward, I can tell you the content of this talk has changed considerably. It says, would you like audio? Sorry, I'm getting distracted. So I've enjoyed getting to know, I'm sorry, I got distracted by Zoom. Anyway, long story short, yes, I have 4 children. I'd like to first start out by just thanking Kathy for all the flexibility and all of her leadership and hard work to take this thing from in-person in March, which was going to be really awesome and fun, through the summer to prepare for these virtual sessions, which have been really valuable for folks. So thank you to Kathy and to the chapter for inviting me to share. I want to preface my talk today. I already said that there's been some changes to my content since I wrote it for the March thing before my entire life changed, and all of our lives, I think, changed due to the pandemic. And so the content today might seem a little bit different than what you've received in other procurement talks. I don't know. But what I'm trying to do is bring something to the table that I think could resonate with all of us, and also maybe just bring a little bit of encouragement. I think for me, I'm looking for encouragement anywhere I can get it in these uncertain times. So bear with me, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share my screen. And let's just make sure that works. All right, so let me get back at the beginning of my presentation. Sorry about that. So the topic that I was asked to speak about was, in an age of digital transformation, what about us? What about the procurement professionals, and what about our humanity, and how do we protect ourselves? And certainly, it's kind of scary as we think about computers, automation, and some of the technological advancements. And it becomes a question of, what do we do now if the computers are going to do everything else? And so, originally I sort of built this talk around current tools that were available, and it was a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? It was a lot more focused on our day-to-day, but as I said, things have evolved. So just really quickly, Jeff mentioned my 4 kids and speaking about them in ratios, which cracks me up. I can't believe I shared that. It's actually true, but this is kind of what my life has been like during the pandemic. So there are 4 water guns, and all 4 of my children are shooting them at me while I'm trying to work. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much what my life has been like. So when I wrote the talk for March, it was, I was Miss Calm professional who goes to an office and says goodbye to my children as they go off to school. And this has been the past, 5.5, 6 months of my life. And so it's been really interesting. Last fall, I moved from Seattle, Washington, back to North Carolina, which is where my extended family is from, where I grew up. And I'm thankful that that happened, because had the pandemic occurred and we'd been in Washington, I think it would have been, my dog is going to bark now. I think it would have been a little bit more difficult for me and the kids to get through this time being so far away from family. But working from home has been a struggle. And I've seen firsthand that there's really only so much stress that one brain can endure. And I'm not proud of this, but I'm a pretty good multitasker. And when you have 4 kids and you work full time, I think you have to be. But it's not a good thing to multitask. I don't think it's the greatest, because I don't think our brains are ever 100% focused on anything. But I can tell you this, this is going to get a little bit personal today, so just bear with me. You may have seen, like, there's a list of top 10 most stressful events in a lifetime that kind of circulates around social media sometimes. And if you click through the link and you look at what the therapist and the people who are analyzing that will say, the common consensus is that any one of these events, and there are events like moving into a new town, starting a new job, death of a close loved one, financial hardship, divorce or separation, marriage, birth of a new baby. I'm not sure if that was all of them, but that was most of them. The consensus from these people is that any one of these events in your life can disrupt your ability to function. And so that really goes back to the fact that, computers are a little bit more resilient than humans. So we're going to be doing a lot of comparisons today between these scary computers and our humanity. And the first thing I would say is that, if you have one of these items, it can really derail you and cause you to have to pause and regroup. And in the past 12 months, I've had 7 out of the 10. So, and that's absolutely true. And I don't say that to garner your pity or anything like that. I'm just saying that that was before the quarantine, and the quarantine was icing on the stress cake. So you can probably guess how I've been feeling and how I've been dealing with the past few months. So I'm sharing because when I considered this topic in light of the pandemic, which is impossible for me to consider anything outside of that, and it's really how do we flex our humanity in a time of digital transformation? I couldn't ignore the really raw and real experience that I've had with coming to a better understanding of the power of my own humanity, but also the frailty of it, and how very fragile our human brains are. So what makes humans and our built-in computers different from the machines and applications that are, as Elon Musk said in this tweet in 2014, potentially more dangerous than nukes? And he was referring to this book, Superintelligence by Nick Bostrom, which is a good read. You should write that down. I tend to be a voracious reader, and this book is really good. Even though it was written in 2014, it still has a lot of prophetic stuff in there that I think could be interesting if you're interested in this stuff. But at the end of the day, I think it's important for us as we consider, and it looks like I'm losing Zoom. So you might lose my presentation for a moment, but I'm just going to keep talking, and I'm going to ask that my internet come back as quickly as possible. And I will sign back in just as soon as I can. I should have sent this presentation to you guys. I'm sorry, guys. Sorry. Jeff, Rob, can you hear me still?
Yep.
I'm still on audio, right?
You're good. The phone connection's solid, and
okay.
And
well,
we're
on
good.
On that note, it is time. It's time for a poll question. So if you can pull up poll question number 1, that'll help waste some time, and I'll get my internet back up here. And then I'm also, as soon as my internet comes back up, I'm going to email you this presentation, just in case this happens again. But
we're just showing you're doing a really good job actually of demonstrating that
yes.
you know, when machines or when technology fails, it turns off. But when something happens that causes us to pause, humans to pause, we get creative and turn on. So you're just, it's
yes, we do.
demonstration of that.
Yeah. Yes, very good. Okay, so it looks like I'm coming back online, but launch the poll, and if everybody could answer the question in light of what we've been talking about, hopefully it'll be an interesting question for you. And I can't see anything, so I'm coming back in, but I'm still on the waiting room space.
All right. Well, yeah, the answers are coming in. We're up to 21
okay.
out of 27.
Great.
Okay, we got a couple of minutes of final loading. Oops. And you need to mute on your computer.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, perfect.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Let me answer. I can answer there.
All right, we got 24.
So,
any last minutes, and I will close out the poll. All right, we got a clear winner.
Really?
We have a clear
surprising.
winner. Yeah. What were you? Where? I don't know. A clear win. Yeah, we do. We have a clear winner. You want me to share the poll results?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Favorite Excel error. Who's going to guess number one? What are you going to guess, Amanda?
I think I'm biased, but I was going to say the ref error.
Okay. Yep. It's circular reference. Came in number one, 38%. Followed by when dates turn to 5-digit numbers. Number two, and then the ref error, and then the not available error comes in as a distant fourth.
That's awesome. Okay, well, I'm sharing my screen again. Hopefully you can see it. I told you my internet would come right back. It's just such a pain. But, you know, thanks to everybody for that. I took these screenshots just so y'all could have a little bit of the PTSD of these Excel errors that torture us all. I especially, you know, I didn't add this one as a choice, but I especially love the little green triangle, like, I want to help you, but I really don't want to help you because I'm giving you an error. And I pretty much know what the error is, but I'm not going to fix it for you, which is, you know, I don't know if any of the rest of you talk to your Excel, but I do. And then here's your favorite one right here. Here's your favorite one right here, the circular reference. And on that note, because I thought that one might be popular, I have to share a meme because, you know, a little Office Space humor here. It looks like y'all are frozen again, so I don't think you can see it, can you? Anyway, it's an Office Space. It's an Office Space meme, and it just has I forget the manager's name, Bill or whatever his name was. You know, Excel, if you could stop giving circular reference bits, that would be great. So I'll see if I can get back online on my computer again. Because you guys are all frozen. So I'm just going to keep talking. So my choice was ref error, closely followed by circular reference. And then I showed the meme. And, you know, sometimes I wish that Excel could just read my mind and fix these errors as they are occurring rather than assuming that I'm the one that made the mistake, right? I'm going to tell you a little story. And this was back when I first moved to Seattle. If you can imagine, you can hear that I have an accent. So I moved to Seattle, and I'm the only person in the office with this Southern accent. My coworkers all sit, there were no walls or cubicles. It was just a bunch of desks in a big space. And it was there was no white noise. So it was very loud. Anything that you said out loud could be heard, you know, within a 15-foot radius, people could hear you. And I'm sitting there, and first of all, I went to Amazon and I thought, it looks like I came back spontaneously onto Zoom. So
Yeah.
let's see.
Yeah.
And it just keeps asking me questions, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I need to talk. Sorry about that. So I get there, and I'm, it's Amazon, and so I'm a little nervous and everything, but I also thought I'm going to go to Amazon and I'm never going to have to use Excel again because it's Amazon. And certainly they've invented something that's better than Excel. And all their financial statements and things, they can't be in Excel. Well, everything at Amazon's in Excel. Okay. So I'm sitting there and I'm using my Excel after it's crashed 7 times because, as you can imagine, the data sets at Amazon are humongous. And I'm clicking around, and you click into a cell, you do something, you move to another cell, and every cell that I would leave, it would leave behind a partial cell border. And there was no rhyme or reason. It would be like 3/4 of a bottom border, and then the next one would be half of a right border. And so it was very annoying because it was doing this weird formatting glitch. And before I could think about the fact that all these people can hear me, that they don't know me very well, they're going to think I'm crazy, I say, hey, is anybody else having issues with their Excel? It looks like, I think my Excel has a demon or something because it's just got this weird glitch or whatever. Well, I mean, these people are not from the South. They don't know what I'm talking about. They're like, oh my gosh, her Excel needs an exorcist, And so I'm just that person that talks out loud to Excel and actually thinks that it's going to fix itself because it needs to be smarter than I am. But seriously, if it was smarter than we were, wouldn't it do that? That's a good question. So in my experience, Excel is only as smart as I am. It can only do what I tell it how to do. And then when I start confusing it, it just says, no, circular reference. So I still get comments on social media from those folks anyway to this very day, like, oh my gosh, you're the girl with the Excel demon. So just so you know.
And Amanda, real quick, I don't know if it might have frozen, but the screen is still on the workspace.
The meme?
Yeah, the meme.
Well, yeah, that's fine. This is the next slide, so we're not quite ready to move forward anyway. But
okay.
So given this question, this problem that I've been having, so I'm in the quarantine, and it's not easy. My body's been under a lot of stress. My brain has been impacted by this stress. It's starting to affect my ability to do my job, to be a mom. It's starting to stress me out because I'm like, what's wrong with my brain? And then in light of this talk today, it's like, what is right with my brain that makes my brain even more intuitive than these brilliant computers that we've invented? So I want to take you through a little bit of the research that I've done over the past couple of months. I think I wrote down 12 books. Jeff asked what books I'm reading. I'm usually reading like 4 books at a time. Read 12 books over the past couple months about brain health and these different things, and I'll get to why in a minute. But essentially, here are some of the primary diagnostic tools for a brain problem. So the human brain, as complex as it is, these are some of the primary tools. So we have X-ray, CT, MRI, PET scan, MRA. Now, and I know that good grief, I hope nobody here is a trained neurologist. If you are, then please take over because I'm not even going to continue to talk. But if you were a trained neurologist, certainly you could see things in these scans that would be meaningful. But as the procurement professionals that we are, that might have a side hobby in brain research, like I currently do, there's not a whole lot here. Like I can't look at these brains and say, yep, that brain is healthy, or no, that MRA, it's showing some anomalies. So there's something wrong with that brain. And in fact, there's a limited amount of diagnoses that even the trained neurologists can make based on these tests that we do, which are really just pictures of the brain. And we all know that the brain is a heck of a lot more than its physiological composition. It's about the neurons and the chemicals inside, which are nearly impossible to see. And even the output of those trillions of interactions every day are very difficult to weed out because it is so complex. However, look at this computer. So if you had to bet $100 of your own money on whether or not this computer works, what would most of you bet? Now this could be another poll, but let's just be informal and let's just think for a second. It looks like a pretty modern laptop. Obviously the power is working because there's something on the screen. The screen image looks fine. They've got Windows 10 installed here. Means it's a fairly modern computer. So if it was me, I'd bet my $100 that this computer works. And how would I test that out? I'd sit down and I'd type out some stuff, and maybe I'd open the internet, see if that works, open Microsoft Word and type a document, see if that works. And then I'd probably find that, yeah, this computer is functioning properly. Now, this computer, however, if I asked you to bet $100 on whether or not this computer functions properly, I'm going to guess that most of you would put all your money on no, this computer will not function properly. So from a physical, just from the physical attributes perspective, it's a little bit easier to see when something's wrong with the computer. It's not as easy with the brain. Now, there are some brain diseases that do show up pretty obviously on MRI, but we're going to pretend that it's pretty much cut and dry, that it's difficult to see what's wrong with your brain. It can be easier to see what's wrong with the physical presentation of your computer. Let's see. So the brain is significantly more complex than modern computers. After all, the very brains that invented computers and have programmed the bots that we're afraid of, those brains were human brains. The brain MRI that's here on the left is of a normal brain. Many of these disorders in the middle of the page would present as a normal brain on MRI. Diagnoses of mental disorders is actually not made typically with these sort of physiological tests. Instead, they use this 947-page manual called the DSM, and this is the 5th version, which is the most up-to-date version that they have. And here's the thing, okay? If you read down the list, certainly some of these do have markers on MRI, like Alzheimer's disease. You can see advanced Alzheimer's disease on an MRI, but early stage, no. We are starting to get some blood tests for early stage Alzheimer's. That's really good, but a lot of this stuff is really just based on rubrics in the DSM, where you list a bunch of symptoms and it's almost, I hate to say it, but it's trained guessing. And it's based on the output of a person whose brain may not be functioning correctly. So, for example, do you feel sad often? It's not really something that you can easily measure. It's not something, and I'm a numbers person, so this bothers me. I'm going to give you a little bit more personal information. I already told you that I've been overloaded with stress, okay? And I'm going to tell you, why does all this stuff matter to me? I've been extremely frustrated with the lack of precision with which mental health disorders can be diagnosed, and then, of course, following up how they can be treated. I'm going to get a little personal. Bear with me. It's all going to come back to procurement, I promise. I've struggled with depression for about a decade. During that time, I've consistently been treated by primary care, by psychiatrists, by counselors. I've utilized talk therapy, meditation, exercise, medication, all of these to manage my symptoms and keep my depression at bay. Unfortunately, the past year has overloaded my system with so much stress that all my previous treatment go-tos, they just stopped working. So I found myself despondent, hopeless, and unmotivated. Some of the worst depression symptoms I've ever experienced in my life. My psychiatrist, who's a very smart man, he's had me on the not so merry-go-round of prescription combinations for the past 6 months to try to compensate for the impact that the life circumstances have had on my mental health. Based on all the trial and error of the past 10 years, plus this latest experiment, I've now been diagnosed with treatment-resistant depression. Lucky me. In other words, until my stress level reduces through improved circumstances and hopefully the end of a pandemic, I have to find other ways to heal my brain. Hence, the research and obsessive reading that I've done that led to this presentation today. 12 books later. Later I'm going to share more about what's giving me hope in my personal mental health journey. I'm doing really well and doing fine. But for now, I'm going to get back to the content and get to the point of all this. Basically, one benefit in a computer is if there's something wrong, if the computer's not working properly, we can examine the code. And in fact, we can even download applications that can debug code without any human intervention. So it can find the mess, the mix, the mistake, and it can fix that. Or if it can't fix it, it can at least direct you to where that bug that bug is happening. So we just don't have that simple solution for the mystical human brain, and it's partially due to the complexity that we've just been describing here. So I want to just pause and say, I think I've made it clear, the human brain is complex. So is a computer, and so are the programs that we use, and the programs that are automating our work. All of those things also very complex. But there are some differences, and those nuanced differences are what give us hope as we move forward, and also will point to where we should focus our learning, focus our skill set, focus our career path based on what is very unique about what we have versus what these computers can offer. So we're going to go on to poll question number 2. It's a question about, do I need to stop sharing or no? Okay. Yeah,
Nope,
so which
good.
multiple below represents the amount of information the human brain can store and recall compared to a standard computer? So what's your best guess here, or if you know the answer, kudos to you. So.
All right, the answers are rolling on in.
Incidentally, I stopped sharing because it appears that my internet has now gone out again. So
Oh my gosh.
Zoom,
While you're
appears
doing
to be
that, yeah.
Zoom is reconnecting, but you can go ahead and tell us what, if you want to show the results, and then we can talk through that.
Okay. Anyone else last minute voting? We've got 20 responses in so far. All right, I'm closing the poll in 10 seconds. All right. And I will share the results. So I don't know, Amanda, do you need me to read them? Because if you're not on,
Yeah.
on audio.
Yes.
This one was
Please.
super close. Okay. So the winner was 1/100th at 35%, followed by a tie for 1,000 times and 1/1000th. So we've got a tie for the opposite ends of the spectrum, and then 100 times was in third place at 15%.
Well, that's pretty awesome, because that means that I am bringing information to the table today that is new. There you go. So yeah, if I can get my screen back up, I'll show you some statistics, but essentially the right answer is 1000x. So the human brain can store 1,000 times more data than a computer can. Join with video, I'm back in, coming back. I want to show you a table that gives this particular metric. Sorry, muting. This is a disaster.
That's all right.
Okay. Later. Okay. Get back in my presentation here. All right. Now, internet, just cooperate, please, for a little bit longer. All right. So the poll question, pretty good distribution there of answers. Seems like a lot of folks are guessing. So yeah, 1,000 times. So the human brain has 1 petabyte of storage versus the approximate 1 terabyte of storage with a computer plus, cloud storage and things like that. Additionally, the human brain uses chemicals to communicate. The modern computer uses electricity. The human brain operates on only 10 watts of power. Modern computer requires 100. So not only is it 1,000 times more, can store 1,000 times more times information, it's 1/10, or it's 10 times more efficient, basically. The big differentiators, though, in the human brain versus the computer are the fact that the human brain can prioritize facts and relate facts to other facts and memories. So it can take a piece of information and batch it together with another piece of information that maybe you've already known, and that can help with quicker recall. Computers so far and AI so far do not have that capability, although we are getting closer. So an example here about prioritizing facts, let's just imagine that you're sitting in a safety presentation at your job. You've just come back from the quarantine. Everybody's back in the office. It's so wonderful to be back, but there are new safety protocols. The guy giving a safety presentation is wearing blue shoes, blue Nikes, and you notice that. In the next sentence, though, he says, now I want to point out to you where the defibrillator is located. So we have first responders on every floor, but if you find yourself needing to do CPR, the defibrillator is located over here. It's near the front door where you came in today for your orientation. So what your brain is going to do is it's going to prioritize the location of the defibrillator. It's going to batch it onto and connect it to that piece of information about the front door, because you've already come in that front door multiple times. You know where the front door is. So now in the moment when you need the defibrillator, your brain's going to go to front door, and then there it will be. It's not going to remember his blue shoes because that's not as important. And your brain does that without you having to tell it to do that. The computer, you'd have to tell it, this is more important. This is the passcode key. This is what I want you to join the table on. It doesn't know those things until you tell it. A relational database, for example, is only smart as the human that designed it. Okay, so before we go on and I sort of tie this back to procurement and show you all why you've spent all this time with me today, which I much appreciate. I told you I've read 12 books, and I told you I've been struggling with my depression, and the quarantine really put me down for the count. But I want you to know that I've done some research, and I've been doing some things, like I'm doing some biofeedback. I had a QEEG brain map of my brain made, which is the waves. I didn't show you that. That's another diagnostic tool for the brain, which are the brain waves. And I have that done, and I'm doing some very alternative therapies to try to supplement what the medications can do, because at the end of the day, the brain is complex, and it's not always as simple as just taking a pill to make it better. But I want you to know I'm better. I'm doing better. I'm here today. That's a testament. 2 months ago, I probably wouldn't have been able to do this. But I want you to be encouraged. So if you're struggling with mental health and you're struggling with figuring out how to help yourself, there are resources out there, but it's a full-time job to like find them, especially if you're in a really bad spot and your doctors have come to the end of their treatment plan and you feel as hopeless as I did. So I just want to encourage you, and certainly if any of you want to hear more about that or have questions, you can reach out to me directly. All right, so how can we optimize being human in this time where we're afraid we might someday be competing with these computers? Oh, this was just so you know, like, I'm on my way to the happy emoji, okay? So no worries about Amanda. So I think the first, I've got basically 3 key points for you. So the first one is, let's be realistic about how much impact technology and digital transformation is actually having on our industry today, procurement, and our processes, but also how quickly we think it can get to the place where we become obsolete. I don't know about you. I've worked at 3 major corporations, all of which were, $25 billion plus companies. And in none of these things did we have full automation, okay? And in most of these things, we had partial automation with maybe a technology tool here or there, but there was human intervention involved in all of it. And if you look at all of these things and you consider all of the systems, all of the applications, all of the technology that could be applied in any of these areas of our work, it starts to get really messy, and it starts to become this big ball of like bubblegum and masking tape solution that ultimately without the human, it can't do anything. And so be encouraged that we're still, in my opinion, pretty far away from the point where most of what we do can be fully automated. Let's see. Yeah, so basically, for us in procurement, especially, technology is still just a set of tools, and we have to build a functional ecosystem. One thing that I think is interesting is the divergence of procurement tech and those of us that are more traditional procurement, where we've been sitting in the negotiating seat, project managing through, RFPs, and more of what I consider to be the value add work that we do, which is bringing that sort of objective perspective to the table, helping businesses craft, really good specifications, some of those things that computers haven't even begun to touch yet. But ultimately, we do need to know how to leverage the tools so that we can do more of that strategic work. And I think it's interesting. So one point I would make is that, are you better at the tools, or are you better at the people skills, the business strategy, the management consulting, the value engineering? What are you better at? And pick a path, because I do think that there will be further divergence. There will be teams that are just managing the tools and the ecosystem, and then there will be teams that are maybe embedded within the businesses, or still sort of separated as procurement or under finance, who are doing the more human pieces of what we're doing, because they're still very significant, and we can't do our jobs without these human brains that are so complex and so very cool. So that's the first tip, is figure out which one are you. Do you lean one way or the other? And then, organize your learning and your career path around one or the other. And I think there's going to be great opportunities for people to specialize in those two areas, as opposed to what we're all doing now, which is kind of a hybrid approach, or at least in my companies, that's the way it's been. All right, so earlier, Jeff mentioned my affinity for raw beef and pork. And so my second point kind of goes back to, why did this lady talk about brain health today, and why did she share about her depression, and what is the point of this talk? I'm so bored, and this lady is so crazy. My point is that I had a problem, right? So I was already struggling with mental health because of all those stressors that had come into my life over the past year. Move that forward, we have a quarantine and a pandemic, and I'm trying to do kindergarten for 2 hours before I start my work day, and then dealing with kids that are needing food and they need activity and they're bored and they're bombarding me with those water guns. I had a problem, and there was no easy solution. And if you think about it, every procurement project and engagement starts out the exact same way. Your business has a problem. It might be an expired contract. It might be a supplier issue. It might be a price issue. Whatever it is, you started with a problem. And in order to solve it, you can go around, there's a lot of different approaches. I mean, most of us have a developed procurement process, 6-step sourcing process, or however you engage with your businesses. You might be embedded in the business as an extension of their finance team. But essentially, when the problem gets on your plate, you start looking at, what are we trying to solve here? And it's very easy sometimes. Oh, we have a supplier problem, so we would like to go out to bid and see if we can find a supplier that can give us a similar price for the same quality and same level of service. Okay, well then let's write the RFP, blah, blah, blah. What I tend to do is, not just go to my psychiatrist and say, give me more medicine because I'm not feeling well. I'm recognizing that he can't. Like, if he keeps giving me more medicine, I'm going to become sedated and I'm not going to have a full life. So I start researching, and I start asking questions of my psychiatrist, of other people that I know, of people that I've contacted online, people that I've found through the books that I've read. And I start researching and learning more about the problem so that I can then figure out how we can best attack fixing it. So when I was brought the problem of the case-ready pork, there were several problems that my business owner was trying to solve. But when the project first came to me, it was, we need a new supplier for case-ready pork because our current supplier is not meeting our quality in 2 of our distribution centers, and we've given them enough nudges and we are ready to move forward. We want to move away from them. Case-ready pork, just so you know, is pork chops, basically. When you go into a store, those pork chops, most of the time, unless you have a butcher in the store, the grocery company that I worked for, which was Food Lion, I don't know if any of you are familiar, they're owned by Ahold Delhaize. They also own Hannaford and Giant Eagle and Giant and Stop and Shop, I think. Anyway, lots of grocery stores, but I was focusing on Food Lion, and our pork was not prepared at the store level. It was prepared and sent in refrigerated totes into the case. So when you go to pick out some pork chops, if you go into a Food Lion, they've come from a supplier who has prepared those pork chops for that store, and they've been delivered typically on a daily or every other day basis. So the problem that I was brought was our supplier isn't meeting the quality. We want to do a project where we evaluate quality, we evaluate price, and we get a new supplier who can meet our quality standards. Price wasn't really a problem necessarily, but when I dug into it and I asked more questions, the category manager said, I think I asked a question like, well, tell me some more, what are some other pinch points for you in this process with this supplier? Well, I have to go in and I have to get my category analyst to change the price. And at Food Line, we had 104 different prices because we had 104 different price zones. So 104 different prices for the pork. And because the cost was changing weekly based on the commodity price, we were going in and changing that price on a weekly basis. And the category analyst was spending anywhere from 10 hours a week to 20 hours a week doing nothing but price adjustments for the case-ready pork program. Not the greatest use of her time. There's something that maybe technology could help with, but at the time we were still on a DOS-based ordering system, so that wasn't going to happen. My point is, by asking that question, I found, okay, the problem is the supplier, but here's another problem that's sort of supplier agnostic, right? Because changing the price weekly, that might be the industry standard, but is that really the only way that we can do it? We were at that point, our system was sort of a limiting factor for us because it was DOS-based and there was no way to automate the price changing or to do anything to make that process less human, manually performed by a human. And so I just wrote that down and I said, okay, need new supplier, poor quality, changing price weekly. And so, I asked more questions. I asked questions about, well, what are the quality concerns? And I heard words like spinellus muscle and bone dust, which are all areas of quality in a pork chop. You might not think about this, but when you buy a pork chop, if you notice little white, so if you buy the bone-in kind, there's little white flecks that'll sometimes get on top of your pork chop. Those little white flecks are bone dust. Those are what would be considered to be an error in the preparation of that pork, because customers don't really want to buy something that has like what looks like random white dust on top of the pork chop. It's not harmful. Typically, it doesn't affect the taste or the quality of the food. It's not, like I said, it's not harmful. But certainly, you'd want to rinse that off. You wouldn't want to be eating little dust of the bones that have been cut there. And so I heard words like spinellus muscle. Spinellus muscle is this dark part of the pork chop, and you guys are all like, your eyes are glazing over because you're like, who cares? Who cares about pork? My point is that I was determined that I was going to learn as much as I could about this product and how the supply chain worked and what all the value chain activities were, so that I could come to the table with a solution that was more than just, let's get a new supplier and, at the same exact specification with the same exact process. It became a quest to solve all of the problems with this project and really to think a little bit beyond the scope of what procurement normally does. So some of the things that I did, I joined a weekly commodity call for the pork market. And I found this through somebody on LinkedIn. I said, do you know of any calls that just anybody can join? And he directed me to basically a think tank, and they had weekly calls, and I learned about raw carcasses and cutout prices and what did that do? You're like, why do you need to know all this, Amanda? Like, are you obsessed with knowing everything? A little bit. But it was also because, then I come to the table, and when I'm talking to the suppliers, I'm speaking a language they don't expect me to speak. So they may say, well, Amanda, and they may pat my hand, the prices change weekly because of this commodity market that drives our prices on the raw product. And then I can ask the question, well, are you using the cutout price or using the whole carcass price? Or are you just using the offals? The offals would be buying a portion of the raw product. And they're like, aren't you in procurement? And so it gives you a little bit of a leg up, I think. And as well, you're speaking the language of your business. They relax and they trust you a little bit more because they know that you're seeing this problem through their eyes. And not only are you providing the procurement services, but you're also providing a little bit more, I consider it to be almost like management consulting, where you're helping them solve problems that hey, we're at a good point in time. If we're going to change suppliers, let's look at the whole process, because cost to change is cost to change. And if there are things that we need to change that would disrupt normal business anyway, let's put them all together and do it all at once so that we can plan it and implement that correctly. So that the end result of that project ended up being that we fixed it where we didn't have to do the weekly price changes. That was a very complex solution, but we went to a logistics provider, and part of it was the freight cost was fluctuating. So we said to the freight company, who we had millions of dollars of business with outside of case-ready pork, we said, we really just want to change this price monthly. So there's three pieces to the price. There's the raw commodity cost, there's the freight cost, and then of course there's the overage, which we auctioned off. We auctioned off the overage and got a 32% cost savings, and locked that in for a 2-year term, which was millions of dollars of savings that was passed on right to the consumers. But we also took away that pain point of having to change the prices every week. How did we do that? Because I'd asked the right questions, and I figured out that we had a partner, a logistics partner, who could sort of carry that risk for us over 4 weeks, and then we could make them whole in the next month with the price change and putting all of that fluctuation and variability into the freight that we were paying them, as opposed to the commodity cost that we were paying directly to the supplier. I don't want to get I'm getting too technical and in the weeds. The point of this story is that, none of my procurement tools solved any of these problems, and none of my procurement tools helped me figure out how could I provide the most value to this business sitting in the role that I'm sitting in. And the story, the end of that, how did I do that? I opened up my brain and I collected knowledge, and I used that knowledge to make myself an extension of the business. And the result of that is really embedding yourself in the business, and they come to you with a lot more problems. You're not dealing with so much reactivity. Oh my gosh, they just spent 20% more than they were supposed to in this category, and nobody talked to me. What's going on? Instead, they're coming to you ahead of time and they're saying, guess what? We just got a budget increase. We're going to be doing 2 extra projects that you haven't been a part of. Would you like to help us negotiate those SOWs? And that's what ends up happening, because they know that you will provide value no matter what the problem is, even if it's not the traditional in-a-box procurement problem. So point number 1, how to flex your humanity in an age of digital transformation. Point number 1 was basically to become a master of the tools and figure out which direction are you more bent towards. Regardless of that, point number 2 is knowledge is power. Be willing to learn everything you can about your business and the projects, and be willing to really go the extra mile. And it makes a huge difference in your value and then in the outcome of the project. And then third, I really feel like organizational design and strategy is going to be a big point of concern for us over the next 5 years. Where does procurement belong now? We've been under finance, we've been under supply chain, we've been embedded in the businesses, we've taken direct and put it in the businesses and taken indirect and put it over here by itself. I think organizational design is going to make a big difference as far as how we can drive value for the organization. And we have to start sort of showing our humanity by giving more of this value engineering, business strategy and management consulting, predictive planning, which is something that I think is a big hot button for me. Is, right now we are at the mercy of the businesses to get their budgets in and to give us visibility to those budgets. If we don't have a simplified central planning tool that can help us with our pipeline and can be sensitive to changes as the budgets change, then that changes our pipeline. And I haven't found any automated solution that can flag us when something changes in our pipeline. So if anybody knows that, reach out to me. But we need to do less project management, less gatekeeping, and a lot less reactionary planning. And all of these, reducing the less and increasing the more, those are all human things. So I think point number 3 is just continuing to evolve the value that we bring to the organization by giving more of what's on the left and less of what's on the right, and doing that through knowledge is power, and then flexing the technology tools where appropriate and giving them their due, but not overemphasizing them, because they're still, in my opinion, a long way away from being what they really need to be. So, okay. That is the end of my talk. So we don't have much time. I over talked. So I'm going to just send it back over to Rob. And if you want to have some time for questions and answers, that's fine. Or we can just move on, and people can reach out to me via email if they want to talk further.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. And maybe what we could do is, if you want to type your contact information into the chat box, so if anybody does have any questions that they want to reach out and get some additional help, I think that would be great. Thank you. And by the way, just wanted to acknowledge you, Amanda, for sticking through it through all the tech challenges that everybody's facing. I mean, this is real life right now. It's not just the kids and the dogs, which is also parts of real life, but now it's the internet connections and storms and power outages and all the other things. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Let's
sure.
Yeah, that was awesome. Cool. So the next thing that we're going to be transitioning into another session on negotiation. And before we do this, we're going to do a little bit of interactive sharing with everybody on the team. So if you were eating lunch or having a snack or doing anything else, this is a great time to come on video. And so here's the question that we're going to be sharing. So what I'm going to do, and how many of you have been on the previous presentations where we did breakout rooms before, just by a show of hands? All right, good. So you guys are pros at this, or should be pros at this. So here's the question on the topic of negotiation. And it's a story of successful negotiations. So think of a time in your career when you had a particularly successful negotiation. It could be something that you did directly. It could be something that you read in a case study. It could be something that a mentor told you a story about. But an example of a really successful negotiation. So what were the elements that made that negotiation so successful? And how were those negotiations conducted in a way that led to success? And then were there any hidden elements that may have been at play, things that might not be obvious to people? Just as Amanda was talking about, sometimes the things that work aren't always visible. Sometimes the things that don't work aren't always visible on scans. So maybe there was some hidden elements in it. So I'm going to put the question into the chat box for everybody briefly. And I'll give you a minute or two to journal on that topic. And then what we will be doing is sending everyone into groups of about 4 people each so that you can share your answers to the story. And we'll probably take about 3 minutes each to share the story and some of the hidden elements that you have. And then if there's any extra time at the end of the breakout, then you can just share some of the lessons that you got from the stories that people heard. So think of a time in your career when you had a very successful negotiation, something you did directly, a case study, or something that you have heard from a mentor. And I will put on just a little bit of journaling music for maybe about 1 minute. You guys probably have this down. You're all supply chain pros, so you know about successful negotiations. Maybe you can think about the way that people were, you handled the negotiation in a way that was really constructive or innovative, or that you involved the suppliers cooperatively. Cool. You guys ready to have some conversations with each other? This should be fun. And for those of you who know the drill, you know how to get the amazing people at Zoom to jump into breakout rooms. You put your hands together like this and you start waving. And when they're feeling the energy, you will go into breakout rooms. A little blue box will come up, and then you can be whisked off to a breakout room with probably 3 or 4 of your comrades in the supply chain industry. And so share, again, about 3 minutes each, and we will be coming back in about 14 or 15 minutes. Have fun.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello there. How are
Hello,
you?
you too.
Hi, Dave. How are you?
Good, how you doing?
Good, good. Does anybody have anything they wanted to share? I don't actually do negotiations. I actually work in the office for ISM New Jersey. So I really need you two to do some good sharing here.
Sure, so I guess I'll go first.
Okay.
So I mean, in my career, you know, through all the negotiations, you know, some of the ones that stand out as being the best ones are the ones where I do the preparation up front and put myself in the shoes of the supplier. What are they looking for? What do they want? What are they getting out of this? What do I have that, what can I offer them that would benefit them, that they would see a value? And then how do I position that relative to what I want, what I need, and what's valuable to me?